Across the heart of America, the rumble of machines is falling silent. In cities once fueled by the roar of assembly lines and the clanging of steel, there's an eerie quiet taking over. General Motors, one of the last standing giants of American manufacturing, is shutting down factories at a pace no one saw coming. From Michigan to Indiana, Ohio to Texas, facilities that once rolled out thousands of vehicles a day now sit idle. Workers are being sent home, production lines frozen, and communities left hanging in uncertainty. What on earth is happening to GM? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future of American manufacturing? Let's be clear, this isn't just a pause. These aren't temporary hiccups. What we're witnessing is a sweeping restructuring, a brutal and calculated move that suggests GM is preparing for something big. Or worse, something desperate. The company claims it's shifting toward electric vehicle production. But here's the problem. The EV transition is slower than expected, demand is inconsistent, and competition from Tesla, China, and now even startups is absolutely ruthless. GM's traditional business is shrinking, and its EV future is far from guaranteed. This wave of shutdowns is not just about outdated plants. Some of these facilities had just received major investments in recent years. Billions poured into upgrades, now abandoned. The company is scaling back truck production, canceling future models, and even delaying battery plant construction. Why? Because demand has plummeted, inventories are piling up, and dealers are choking on unsold vehicles. Consumers simply aren't buying like they used to, and rising interest rates, inflation, and a shaky economy have made new cars unaffordable for millions of Americans. And here's where it gets even darker. These shutdowns aren't isolated. They're part of a broader collapse in the American industrial core. Ford, Stellantis, even foreign automakers with U.S. plants are quietly trimming shifts, laying off workers, and pulling back on production targets. This isn't just GM. This is an unraveling of a manufacturing model that once powered the world. What's worse, local economies are crumbling in the wake. When a GM factory closes, it's not just a few jobs lost. It's a tidal wave. Suppliers shut down, restaurants close, real estate tanks. Entire towns dependent on one major plant spiral into decline. It's the same story that devastated the Rust Belt in the 80s and 90s. Only now, it's repeating, just with shinier tech and different excuses. GM is trying to spin this as a pivot to the future. They talk about innovation, AI, EV platforms, and sustainability. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room. This is also about cost-cutting, shareholder pressure, and global outsourcing. More and more manufacturing is being sent to Mexico, China, and even Canada, where labor is cheaper, regulation is lighter, and profits are higher. The American worker, once the backbone of GM's empire, is being replaced, not by robots, but by a new wave of corporate prioritization. And what about the unions? UAW leaders are furious. Promises made just months ago during contract negotiations now appear hollow. Striking workers fought for job security, planned investments, and future-proof employment. But with factories closing left and right, trust in GM leadership is crumbling fast. There's talk of legal action, renewed labor unrest, and a mounting sense of betrayal spreading through the ranks. Meanwhile, Wall Street is celebrating. GM stock has ticked upward on news of the shutdowns. Investors love leaner operations, but that short-term gain hides a long-term cost. You can't gut your manufacturing base and expect to lead the future. America didn't become a superpower by outsourcing innovation. It did it by building on U.S. soil with American hands. And that's what's truly at stake here. This isn't just about cars. It's about identity, pride, the idea that America builds things, real things, powerful things, world-changing things. If GM gives up on that, if the nation's most iconic automaker chooses the path of abandonment over adaptation, what hope do we have for the rest of the industry? We are watching history repeat itself in slow motion. The difference now? We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, unless something or someone steps in to rewrite the script. So who's going to step in? That's the burning question echoing across factory towns and boardrooms alike. Is it the government's responsibility to intervene and protect these industrial hubs? Or should GM, with decades of taxpayer bailouts behind it, be held accountable to the very communities that kept it alive? The silence from Washington so far has been deafening. No major rescue packages. No aggressive industrial policy. just vague promises of EV subsidies and green energy jobs that have yet to materialize in the very places losing thousands of traditional ones. In the meantime, foreign automakers are seizing the opportunity. Toyota, Hyundai, even Volkswagen are doubling down on U.S. soil, snatching up laid-off talent and filling the void with their own expansion plans. But even then, the jobs don't always match the pay, benefits, or long-term stability of what GM once offered. It's a patchwork solution, not a fix. The U.S. auto industry is being pulled in too many directions: electrification, automation, globalization, and no one's really steering the wheel with a clear plan. Inside GM, morale is reportedly at an all-time low. Workers are disillusioned. Mid-level managers are jumping ship. Engineers who once designed award-winning powertrains are now being reassigned or let go. There's a growing fear that GM's leadership has lost its identity, trying to be a tech company, an energy company, a global conglomerate. Anything but what it was built to be, an automaker. And in trying to be everything at once, they're failing at the one thing that made them great. Let's talk numbers. Just last quarter, GM reported a dip in U.S. market share. Again, consumer confidence in the brand is slipping, especially in core segments like full-size trucks and SUVs, which have traditionally been its bread and butter. Electric vehicles, once hyped as the future, are stagnating. The Chevy Bolt is discontinued. The Silverado EV is delayed. And competitors like Rivian, Lucid, and Tesla are racing ahead with fresher designs and stronger brand loyalty in the EV space. Now consider this. If GM can't win in either arena, combustion or electric, what space do they really dominate anymore? They've given up the sedan market. Their dominance in trucks is fading, and their global strategy? Struggling. China, once their biggest cash cow, is becoming increasingly hostile to foreign automakers. Market share there is evaporating as domestic brands surge with aggressive pricing and high-tech features. Meanwhile, Europe is barely on GM's radar after years of retreat. The truth is hard to swallow, but it's becoming increasingly obvious. GM is running out of road. And as they scramble to reinvent themselves, the clock is ticking fast. Investors want results. Workers want answers. And American consumers? They want reliability, affordability, and trust, none of which come from shuttered factories and broken promises. But here's the real danger. If GM collapses or becomes a shadow of its former self, it won't just be about one company falling. It'll signal the fall of something far bigger. The idea that America can still lead in manufacturing. Because if GM, with all its resources, history, and infrastructure, can't make it work, who can? Factories don't just vanish, they rot. Rust spreads, weeds take over, and soon, the next generation walks by a skeleton of what once was with no memory of the pride, the grit, the sheer scale of what was once built there. This isn't just about business decisions. It's about the erasure of a legacy. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. And now, we're seeing that erasure play out in real time. Town halls are filled with worried families. Union meetings are growing more heated. And news anchors talk about strategic shifts while avoiding the real pain behind the headlines. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're lives. Generations of workers who built their futures on the promise of a GM paycheck. Fathers training their sons on the same lines they once manned. Mothers whose pensions now hang in the balance. These stories are vanishing into the corporate black hole of restructuring. Meanwhile, automakers abroad are looking at this chaos and licking their lips. Chinese EV giants like BYD and NIO are aggressively targeting U.S. consumers. They're undercutting prices, outpacing innovation, and rapidly expanding into markets once ruled by the big three. And guess what? They don't carry the baggage GM does. No aging factories, no bloated bureaucracy, just lean, hungry competition with the full backing of their government and global supply chains built for speed and scale. If GM continues to falter, it's not just a matter of losing ground. It's a matter of being overtaken completely. And this leads to a terrifying thought. What if GM isn't preparing for a comeback, but for an exit? Quietly scaling back domestic operations while expanding partnerships and licensing deals abroad? It's not unthinkable. We've seen legacy brands and other industries hollow themselves out, retreat from their home markets, and morph into little more than logo licensing operations. Could GM go the same route? Could the proud maker of the Corvette, the Silverado, the Suburban become just another badge slapped on a vehicles made elsewhere by someone else? This isn't just about nostalgia. It's about strategic survival. America can't afford to lose yet another pillar of its industrial base. Now when the world is entering a new era of economic nationalism. Not when the next global arms race won't be fought with missiles, but with microchips, batteries, and who controls the factories that make them. Manufacturing is no longer just about economics. It's about national security. But here's the real kicker. GM had a head start. Years of experience, billions in assets, generations of brand loyalty, a vast, coast-to-coast footprint. And yet, it's fumbling the transition, stuck in a loop of boardroom paralysis and risk-averse strategy. The future is demanding bold moves, and GM is responding with factory closures and production delays. That's not leadership. That's retreat. So where's the fight? Where's the innovation that once built the world's best trucks and muscle cars? Where's the urgency? Because right now, the silence from GM's top brass is louder than any engine roar. And for the people on the ground, it's sounding a lot like the final echo of something once great. And as that echo fades, the impact begins to ripple outward beyond the factories, beyond the supply chains. Local colleges are scaling back automotive training programs. High schools are canceling vocational auto tech courses. Why train the next generation for jobs that may no longer exist? The pipeline of skilled American labor is drying up right alongside the industries that once depended on it. And when those skills are gone, rebuilding won't be a matter of flipping a switch. It'll take decades, if not longer. Dealerships, too, are feeling the squeeze. Inventory is stagnating. Incentives are climbing, but foot traffic is dropping. Consumers are hesitant, unsure if the vehicle they buy today will still be supported tomorrow. Will GM even be around in its current form 5 years from now? It's a legitimate concern, especially when customer confidence is shattered and media headlines scream uncertainty every other week. And yet, while all of this unfolds, GM continues to double down on the same narrative. This is part of the transformation. But transformation into what? A leaner, greener company with fewer workers? A brand that imports more than it builds? A tech-forward automaker that outsources manufacturing while selling mobility solutions? The message is murky, and that's a problem. Because if you're going to dismantle an empire, people deserve to know what you're building in its place. But the truth? There's no unified vision coming out of GM right now. Just reactionary moves. Cut here, delay there, rebrand this, cancel that. It's the corporate equivalent of plugging leaks on a sinking ship. And while they may call it adapting to market realities, it feels a lot more like surviving quarter to quarter than planning for a generational future. And let's not forget the political angle. With the presidential election looming, both parties are now circling the GM situation like vultures. One side sees an opportunity to hammer home the message that America is losing its edge, that globalism has gutted the working class. The other promises green jobs and technological advancement, but offers little to the families staring down their final paychecks. GM has become a symbol, not just of corporate struggle, but of national identity in crisis. So what happens if this continues? What happens when another plant closes and then another? What happens when Detroit, once the beating heart of American industry, becomes a cautionary tale taught in business schools around the world? Will we look back and see this moment as the turning point, when America finally gave up on making things at home? Because make no mistake, this isn't just GM's battle anymore. It's America's. It's the choice between surrendering manufacturing leadership or fighting to reclaim it. And right now, that fight is barely hanging on. In once booming cities like Flint and Lordstown, people have stopped waiting for GM to come back. Abandoned lots sit where assembly lines used to hum with energy. Small businesses that depended on factory foot traffic have closed their doors for good. Property values have plummeted, and the next generation is either leaving town or growing up without ever knowing what it meant to have stable, middle-class employment tied to American industry. The psychological toll is devastating. It's not just an economic collapse, it's a cultural one. Meanwhile, overseas, automakers are gaining confidence. They see America's faltering giants not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Countries like China and South Korea are accelerating EV production, snapping up lithium supplies, investing in AI, robotics, and battery tech at levels the U.S. hasn't matched. And while GM hesitates, pivots, and restructures, these players are moving full speed ahead, building not just cars, but entire transportation ecosystems that will dominate the 21st century. And here lies the bitter irony. GM once stood for progress. It It was a pioneer, a standard-bearer, a symbol of what American engineering and determination could achieve. Now, it risks becoming a warning, a relic of an era when we built things to last and led the world through strength, innovation, and grit. But the grit seems gone. The leadership? Scattered. And the mission? Lost in a fog of cost-cutting and half measures. Still, this doesn't have to be the end. It could be the wake-up call. The moment when workers, communities, policymakers, and even other industries finally come together and say, enough. We can't let another titan crumble. We can't keep trading legacy for short-term gain. Because once the machines are dismantled, once the jobs are outsourced, once the knowledge is gone, it doesn't come back. There's still time to change course. Still time to reinvest in domestic production, to empower workers, to protect the communities that built the backbone of the American economy. But it requires more than words from GM. It requires action. Real, measurable, courageous action. Not just to survive, but to lead again. Because if GM falls, it won't be alone. It will drag an entire ecosystem with it. Suppliers, shipping networks, tech partners, and local governments already stretched thin. The collapse of one is the destabilization of many. And America can't afford to lose that much ground. Not in this global race, not now. And yet, GM's top executives still appear detached from the gravity of the moment. Earnings calls are filled with polished jargon, synergy, strategic realignment, capital efficiency. But behind every sanitized term is a closed factory, a family without a paycheck, a town losing its future. The boardroom might be comfortable, but the streets of America are telling a different story, one of rising anxiety, broken trust, and growing anger. That anger is beginning to boil over. Union leaders are no longer mincing words. Local politicians, once loyal to GM for the jobs and tax revenue it brought, are now publicly criticizing the automaker. They're calling out the billions in tax breaks and subsidies handed out over the years. Money that was supposed to secure long-term jobs, not help fund overseas expansion or fuel executive bonuses. The accountability gap is widening, and people want answers. Customers are paying attention too. Brand loyalty isn't what it used to be. In an era where consumers have endless options, from legacy automakers to sleek startups to foreign EV giants, the perception of corporate betrayal doesn't go unnoticed. And with social media amplifying every misstep, GM's decisions are under the microscope like never before. A single plant shutdown can trigger nationwide backlash. A delayed EV launch can wipe out years of brand goodwill. In this environment, reputation is everything. And GM's is on thin ice. Even suppliers, long considered silent partners, are now speaking out. With reduced orders, delayed payments, and erratic forecasting, many smaller firms that rely on GM stability are now facing extinction themselves. They don't have the luxury of restructuring. When their biggest client falters, they're the first to fall. And when they go down, so does the delicate web of American industrial support. Meanwhile, international trade tensions are escalating. Tariffs, export controls, and rising shipping costs are disrupting global supply chains. The very globalization GM leaned on to cut costs is becoming a liability. As countries clamp down on critical minerals, EV battery components, and chip production, companies that offshore their supply chains are being squeezed from every angle. And GM? It's caught flat-footed, struggling to adapt to a world where domestic resilience matters more than overseas convenience. All of this points to a deeper truth. American manufacturing cannot survive on nostalgia or spreadsheets alone. It needs vision, commitment, backbone, and above all, a return to the belief that building in America for America is not just possible, it's essential. GM has a choice to make. It can either become the face of industrial decline or the symbol of an American comeback. But that window is closing. Every shuttered factory, every delayed model, every broken promise narrows the path forward. But despite everything, the shutdowns, the uncertainty, the crumbling trust, there is still a glimmer of hope. Because history has shown that American industry, when backed into a corner, can fight back. We've seen it during wartime production. We saw it during the post-recession auto bailouts. We saw it when workers and engineers pulled together to save the very companies now teetering on the edge. That same spirit still exists. On the factory floors, in the garages, in the classrooms, training the next generation of builders. What's missing is leadership bold enough to harness it. GM's future is not yet written. It could rise again, stronger, smarter, and more committed to American soil than ever before. But that will require more than speeches and stock buybacks. It demands investment in people, in domestic manufacturing, in communities long neglected. It demands owning the mistakes of the past and forging a clearer, braver path forward. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about cars. It's about whether America still believes in itself as a nation that builds, innovates, and leads. If GM falls, it'll be more than a business failure. It will be a warning shot to every industry walking the same path. But if GM turns this around, it could be the spark that reignites the engine of American manufacturing. The choice is theirs. The clock is ticking, and the world is watching.